This is Join Us in France, episode 185. Bonjour, I'm Annie, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, its many quirks, its history, its language, and of course, destinations in France you want to learn about because, hopefully, you'll be visiting soon and you need all the best tips from a local. In today's episode, I help you weigh in the pros and cons of the following question. Is renting a car in France worth the trouble? Join Us in France is brought to you by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, the small group tour company for people who want to enjoy France to the fullest with zero stress. Check out our upcoming tours on addictedtofrance.com and on TripAdvisor. Search for Addicted to France. Here's the question we're going to think about in this episode. Is renting a car in France worth the trouble? The question is not, can you rent a car in France? Of course you can. If you have what it takes to rent a car in America, you can rent one in France. The requirements are pretty much the same. So let's not sweat the small stuff. Renting a car in France is no harder than renting a car in North America. The question you need to ask yourself is, should you rent a car in France? Are there circumstances where you should not rent a car in France? In other words, when does it get to be a royal pain in the behind to have a rental car in France? I decided to address this question because this has come up on several occasions the last few days on the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook, and it is a confusing decision for people to make. I live in France. I love to drive. My nickname is the Parking Queen. But still, I have to admit that sometimes I get mad at myself for choosing the car over other modes of transportation. So let me tell you about the times when you do not want to have a car in France. I suspect most of you won't have any trouble understanding that you don't want a car in Paris. Why? Because parking on the street is really difficult to find. Even for me, the Parking Queen. There are meters everywhere, and when you do find the ever-elusive parking spot, you have to go back and feed the meter every 2 hours. There are underground parking lots in Paris where you can leave your car longer, but you'll pay quite a lot for parking, and many of those parking lots are not easy to get in and out of. You have to understand that French parking lot designers don't think like normal human beings. They have crazy notions like, all you really need is 1-inch clearance, or, they all drive tiny smart cars anyway. So, pay parking lots in France will make you sweat bullets when you're trying to not damage your rental car. And forget everything you know about parking your car at home. Paris is not American suburbia with straight driveways and a nice wide garage door that you open with the click of a button. I want you to know that no matter how much you pay for the parking, it will be considerably more complicated than that. The other problem with having a car in Paris, and this is a problem all over France, is that there are a lot of intersections that you won't understand as a North American driver. They won't make any sense to you because they barely make sense to French people. And when you don't understand how an intersection works, you're putting yourself and others in danger. French people drill for those weird intersections, and you don't, and so you're going to be lost. Now, many of these truly bizarre intersections have been fixed in other parts of France because they are the cause of many accidents. But in Paris and other big cities like that, they really can't close the intersection long enough to fix it, so they slap on a Band-Aid and everybody has to live with it. So In big cities, expect to find bizarre intersections in France. So if you absolutely need to pick up a car in Paris because you're driving out to other parts of France, I recommend that you get your car at one of the major train stations in Paris. There are 6 major train stations in Paris. They are called Gare du Nord, Gare de l'Est, Gare Saint-Lazare, Gare Montparnasse, Gare d'Austerlitz, and Gare de Lyon. Now, you could also go pick up a car at one of the airports, but that's harder to do because you need to get on a special train to go to the airport. A simple metro line, a simple metro ticket will take you to any of the train stations. So that's what I recommend. I'll put a map on the show notes so you can see where all these train stations are around Paris, and you'll be able to see that on joinusinfrance.com/185, the numbers 185. All of these train stations have car rental agencies, but not all of them have all agencies. So if you absolutely want to rent from Hertz, for example, check out which ones have Hertz. But I would assume that's a bad example because probably all of them do. But there are some smaller ones that will only appear here and there. I think you should avoid Paris city driving as much as possible for reasons explained above. So if you're going to drive in the direction of Lyon, then pick up your rental car at Gare de Lyon. If you're going to drive in the direction of Toulouse, rent from Gare Montparnasse. If you're going to Alsace, rent from Gare de l'Est. Make sense? Get as close as you can to the general direction where you want to go. And come to the train station with all your luggage so you don't have to track back into the city, obviously. Now, let's talk about other areas of France. Outside of big cities, France is easy to drive in. Most French people follow the rules. We're predictable, well-trained drivers. The roads are well-maintained overall. All of that is going to seem normal to you. So I don't want to scare you too much, but I want to point out that there are times when a car is a really bad idea. One of these days, I'll put out a book on driving in France because I used to teach driving in France. I only did it for a year, but it was fun. And it's fun to think about how all of that works. But in general, if you are super comfortable driving in a major metropolitan area in America, you're not going to be startled driving in France other than major cities. Most of us think of cars as a great option for people with limited mobility, and they are. But in France, sometimes they're not. Let me explain. If you, the driver, has limited mobility, this is going to be a problem. Because you need a driver who can do a fair bit of walking, go up and down hills, go up and down stairs, and walk without a proper sidewalk as well. Why? Because when you visit scenic little villages perched up on a hill or maybe medieval towns with beautiful half-timbered houses, you will always need to park quite far away from the place you want to visit. And when you are visiting a place with narrow streets and cobblestone paths, you can't park in the village. You just can't. Maybe if you go in the dead of the winter and there's nobody around, you might get in, but don't count on it because if you go most of the year, there's no room. And most of these villages by now have the infrastructure to make you park far away from the village. As close as they can, but sometimes it's not very far away, but sometimes it's a couple of kilometers. All these villages, they need tourism, so they do the best they can to be accommodating. They understand, they often have a small parking lot close to the village center, and then they have an overflow for high affluence days. I've seen places where the overflow is full and people start parking every which way along the roads, which makes it really hard for everybody, trying to walk to the village because they have to walk on the road. But if a village only gets that busy for a few days out of the year, then they really can't invest in an expensive parking lot just for those few days. Just know that if you show up on a popular day, parking is going to be a distance away. And French people don't care about parking that much. We'll park well, most of us will park anywhere. I mean, we do things we shouldn't, which means that they put posts and all kinds of things to stop French people from parking places they shouldn't, which sometimes makes it awkward to drive. But, when we get visitors who are used to a little bit more structure and they get startled by the places we park. I overheard an English visitor once say something like, why don't they hand out tickets to all those badly parked cars? The reason is this is a village that needs the visitors and they don't want to get a reputation for ticketing people. So if unless you're blocking somebody's driveway or something, they'll probably leave you alone is the sad reality. Okay, let me give you one example. There's this place in Provence called Les Baux de Provence. Beautiful place. Absolutely worth the visit. But you really park far away from the center of the village and it's uphill. And most of that way, there isn't a proper sidewalk. So, it's totally doable and worth it for most of us. But if you're going with a person who has limited mobility, requires a wheelchair, or maybe if you're going with strollers, you're not going to enjoy the walk. So I just want to tell you so you know in advance. I'm not saying don't go, okay? What I'm saying is be aware that there is no parking in those scenic little villages. Some places, a few of them have shuttles, at least at high season, between the parking lots and the venues that they know everybody wants to see, right? Those are wonderful, but most places don't have one because it's expensive. So, yeah, plan on walking. And walking is good for you, right? The Mont Saint-Michel is a big exception to all this. They do this really well. They make you park quite far away, but then they give you a free shuttle that comes every 10 or 15 minutes or something. A few tiny towns do this, but not many. So once you've decided where you want to go, look it up. My dear Google will tell you about the parking situation anywhere you wish to go. And, why do they have a nice shuttle service at the Mont Saint-Michel and not at Les Baux de Provence? You guessed it, money. The other thing I want to emphasize is Provence with a car in the summer is hell. There are so many people driving around just trying to find a parking spot that city streets are always packed with cars, and those cars are going nowhere. It's as much fun as LA at rush hour. So if you're going to Cannes, Nice, Sainte-Maxime, Saint-Tropez, Fréjus, Antibes, Cagnes-sur-Mer, or anywhere along that coast, do not go by car. Or if you do, drop off the car at the car rental agency as soon as you arrive. If you're staying for several days and you picked a hotel, so say you're in Nice for a few days. Example, okay? You're in Nice. You want to go to Saint-Paul-de-Vence for the day. Of course you do. It's a beautiful place. The first thing you should ask yourself is there a bus that will take me there? And that's a good question for the local tourist office, isn't it? Ask them. It's their job to help you find local transportation. They know all the lines, they know all the good tips, and that's what they're there for. So first, try to go by bus. It's cheap, it's clean, it's safe, and you don't have to mess with parking or driving. And I know in America, buses have kind of a bad image. But you know what? In France, they're perfectly fine. You will find the whole world takes the bus in France. It's not that strange. Lots of people don't have a car and live a completely full life without a car. So don't be hesitant about that. Just try it. And if you want to take a day trip somewhere that doesn't have a bus from where you are, if you've been to the, tourist office and they can't give you a good solution, then rent a car for the day, but only for that day. One of the worst things you can do in the summer in those popular vacation spots is rent a car and keep it for several days. You'll be stressed out about parking the car the whole time. And, renting a car for several days in a row doesn't even give you a discount on the rental, does it? You pay the same per day if you keep the car for a day or for a week. So don't keep it for a week. Or go back and get a different car for the next day or for a few days in a row if you have to, but I wouldn't mess with parking a car anywhere in those popular towns in Provence. If you're going to be mostly on the beach because you like the beach and you don't plan to take day trips or go visit museum or things like that, then stay at a hotel on the beach. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to be moving around, visiting various places, then get a hotel near the city center. Where I like to stay is next to the main city plaza, or maybe next to the main cathedral, or maybe next to a major, covered market, but always the city center. Train stations and bus stations are usually right next to each other, and they are always walking distance to city center. So I recommend you get a hotel or even an apartment in the city center, but not right at the train station. Why not right at the train station? Because many cities in France, that area right next to the train station can be a bit seedy. Now, this is not always true, but in many places I've visited, the area right around the train station is not a good idea, okay? And it's never as nice as the city center. Now, I'm telling you all this about Provence, but it doesn't just apply to Provence. It's anywhere in France that's popular for summer vacations or long weekends. And we have a lot of long weekends in May and June. Anywhere there's a beach, and it's summer or spring, parking is going to be awful. Or if it's nowhere near a beach, but it's beautiful, scenic, you've read all these recommendations about, you should go visit this. Yeah. Parking will be awful. All right. So here's your homework for today. Your job as a smart visitor is to figure out what you want to do. You make a real plan. And then when you're ready with your real plan in hand, you can figure out the specifics of the easiest way to get where you want to go. If you show up at the tourist office saying, "Is there a bus between Nice and Menton?" They can help you with that. They will help you with that. But if you show up saying, "I have no idea what I want to do. I don't even know what I want. But, I hear this place is cool. What do you think?" You know what they're going to do if you say that? They're going to shove a map in your hand and hope you leave the premises because they can't help you. You don't even know what you want. So do your job. Decide what you want. And this podcast is a great resource to help you decide what you want. And there are other resources that will also help you figure out what you want. So keep listening. Listen to the episodes that have to do with the places you're interested in and decide what you want. And if you have friends who are visiting France, tell them about this resource and encourage them to be well prepared. So to conclude, your vacation time is precious. Don't waste it looking for a parking spot. If you need a car, keep it for as little time as you can. Check it back in to the car rental agency and let it be their problem, not yours. Use the tourist offices to find out about bus services, excursions to various places. You could call an Uber too. We have that in France, And maybe the tourist office will tell you to take the train. They know what's best for that particular area. And summer in Provence and anywhere near a beach is driving and parking hell in France. You have been warned. Thank you, Cynthia Eberhard and Rindy Dalter, for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. And thank you to all the other patrons who support the show month after month. Thank you so much for giving back. To find out how to support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/join us. Patreon, join us, no spaces or dashes. And thank you so much. For my personal update this week, I am in Spain enjoying a bit of sunshine, so I'm going to keep it super short. It turns out that Spanish cafes and beachfront are good places for me to pick up my book and work on it some more. So thank you, España. Just changing environment has given me inspiration. Lots of you ask questions on the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook, and I will be answering a lot of them in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. Next week on the show, I'll answer the question, is it possible to visit the Mont Saint-Michel on your own as a day trip from Paris? And how do you do that? The best way to connect with me is via email, annie@joinusinfrance.com, or if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, leave a message on 1-801-806-1015. Don't be shy. Call 1-801-806-1015. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2017 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.